We're not frogs. I think that people misunderstand what hormones do. It can make you sterile. There are people who are born intersex.
So I'm talking about the people that are definitely not intersex and, the increasingly high number of people doing this.
I would affirm my child.
In your mind, what is it to be a woman? Like, how much does this have to do with clothing, fashion, makeup?
At this point, it has almost nothing to do with it.
So if
At,
human
at one
beings
at
didn't
one
wear
point,
clothes,
at one point, the things that are on the outside um, were important to me now.
like if we literally lived without clothing at all, no clothing, no cute shoes, no earrings, no makeup, none of it,
I would still be
completely naked.
I would still be Kailey.
Okay, so then the difference there would be what? That your name is different? Like what in that case would make you different than in the way that you were born?
I think it has to be internal.
Okay, so the way you feel.
I think it's the way my mind works. I think it's I don't know that it's not I don't know that our soul has a masculine or a feminine um personality or that I expect is more malleable than that and probably can't be defined with gender so much. I think it's some of it is social. Um, but I think the things that are
So social how?
and how we want to be seen, not how we want to be seen like how we dress and what our fashion is. Although for some people that's very important. That's less important for me now. Dave, that the things that you talked about were more important to me at some point in my life. And now I have started this new life as Kailey, and I don't struggle with shoes. I don't care what shoes I wear. I think the person that I was on the inside has been allowed to come out and be me. And that is not a person that struggles. I'm not wearing any makeup right now at all. It's just I'm not. I don't need that to define me. I don't need.
So that's
I
a
don't
fair
need to have
point.
surgeries to define me. So I guess your question might be, so why can't you just have been who you were without without changing, right? And now, why is it that you have to be Kailey? If you're happy with who you are now, why can't you just be happy with her?
Well, to
And
be
really,
clear, I want to make
I don't
something.
know. I don't know. This beyond it's really beyond what I have really personally searched for. Even
See, I want to say this. When you
okay,
just said just now, I don't know, that's the part I respect the most. To say, you know what? I don't know. I don't know why it is the way I want to be this way,
yeah,
because I see a degree of honesty in that. And like I said, I'm just curious,
yeah.
what's your idea? Like,
I
what
mean, see,
does
otherwise
being a woman,
I'd
you
have to
feel
come.
the need, you feel
Go
the
ahead.
need to live as a woman, which I'm not even judging that. You want to do that. You're a full grown adult. You're what, 53?
5.
5. Okay. 53 years old. Okay, that's one thing. My concern is when I see, obviously I've watched other interviews of you talking about, if the parent themselves consent that someone under the age of 18 can do hormone replacement there. Like these are things I got to push back on because I'm just going to I completely disagree with that. So what is
Mhm.
this still an opinion that you hold? Has your opinion changed? Like what is your view on that?
Okay.
If I have a 15-year-old child and they tell me this is what they wanna do.
If I mean, I have to relate it to myself. If I were living today and I had a better understanding for what transgender is, I would have come out to my parents, I think. I would have sought therapy. Hopefully, I would have been working with someone who didn't have an agenda one way or another and only wanted to implement best practices. If they and I saw that the only way that I can exist really without harming myself or to even have my best future life were to start some kind of hormone replacement therapy, then I think that, and it's hard for me to put an age on it, but I'll say, because that's what people want to hold you to that. People don't ever let you change your mind or
No,
for
you're more than welcome to change your mind. That's why I
yeah,
want to get
okay, but I'm saying you say something like on a video here, and then they're going to bring it up 30 years from now. So why are you back here? You said no, 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 no. And I go,
that's fair.
I
And
don't know,
that's why I want to say, hey, potentially
and
you've changed your mind. I
evidence
don't
to
know if you've
change. I
changed your
mean,
mind.
I'm one who has changed, right? So let's say 16 years old. I have gone through some degree of puberty. Um, and I
Would you
start
say that a
taking
16-year-old, and apologies for cutting you off, but would you say a 16-year-old who is insisting that if they're not allowed to go through hormone replacement therapy, tampering with their genetics, that if they're not able to do that at 16, that they're going to kill themselves? Is it fair to say that they,
that's
hold
not
on, here's the
that's
question. Here's the question. Is it fair to say that they are not in the right mind to make a permanent lifelong decision if this is what their mind state is?
I think if someone has had so here's my own this is how I understand, and I'm just going to give you how my understanding of how I became to be this way. And it might scientifically prove to be wrong. And I'm open to that. And if it's wrong, even still, why should society even care? Really? I mean, the things you said you're an adult, we're applying this to children. That's a categorically perhaps different thing. There are people who are born intersex.
That's a different situation.
That's maybe
That's an
not a diff.
anomaly.
That's
We're not
maybe
talking
not a
about.
different. Maybe that's maybe not a different situation.
Well, intersex is it's a physical anomaly. So that is certainly one thing where you could perhaps make an exception for if they were born with physically with both male and female functions, a choice has to be made. That's literally an anomaly. So I'm talking about the people that are definitely not intersex and, the increasingly high number of people doing this. Look, if they're adults, they're adults. They can do whatever the hell they want. I'm just curious. So this is still what you think is, 16 under a certain circumstance. Do you think
Sure.
they should be allowed to do this?
I'm telling you, I researched before, and we made this may be a point of just where we can't come to an agreement on it.
Which is fine.
But the formation of a human person is an immensely complex process. When we're created, we look like lots of other kinds of animals, and it's to a certain point we could go either way on being a specific gender. Even in the animal kingdom, there are animals that have characteristics that could be considered male or female. There's some kinds of animals, and I know we're human beings, we're not frogs, but it is possible for, say, some amphibians, if there's not enough, say, females around for a frog or toad to be able to become the other gender and then procreate. So it's so what I'm saying at a base level, it exists inside the animal. There's precedent in the animal kingdom for something that begins one gender to morph into something else, and it's within the animal kingdom for some genders that have characteristics that, as humans, we associate with the other gender. Now, in terms of intersex, it's it's not necessarily someone has two kinds of external genitalia. There's internal, there's also different levels of hormones that are within someone's body. Lastly, there are and can be differences in brain structures and brain function. My best understanding is that my brain is a type of intersex. And there's been some work on it. And I don't need to go quoting a study because I've read about it, but I don't feel like I have that to prove. When I was a child, I understood that something was not right. It's not that I just wanted to be a girl. I felt like I was.
What was the first time you said that you always knew something was off, you were missing something?
Well, I was 5 years old.
Yeah, so I'm
My
curious,
earliest
like, what
memory.
was that the very first time that you said, okay, maybe what it is that I want to be a woman? Do you remember the first time that you came like to this specific conclusion that that's what you wanted to do? And if so, what influenced that?
Yeah, and it has been it's never been that it's never been that simple, Dave. I mean, when I'm young, it's the seesaw of identity. How do I feel? How do I feel today? It wasn't like it was running around in my mind every moment, every second. If I was playing kickball, I was playing kickball. I wasn't worried about gender. If I was, playing in the pool, I wasn't thinking about that. But there are times that I did, and it was consistent from a young age to an older age. And I will try to bring this back to youth because that's what we started with, and it really didn't come to any kind of, not that it will come to a conclusion, but it that's what we were discussing. So I'll bring it there. I think if I would have changed it at 16 and I started today, and so I think that people misunderstand what hormones do. I'm not talking about having a bodily surgery at that point. I did think someone should be an adult before they make those kinds of changes. Sure, if you start hormone blockers when you're 11, 12, it can make you sterile.
Well,
I haven't complete,
definitely they're going to make you sterile no matter what age you start doing them.
and I can't think of. I haven't completely thought through my personal ethic on that age. I mean, that has to be fair enough because that's where I am. But if I could have began life as Kailey younger and had changes to my body while I still had some puberty left, I would have lived my life. I don't regret the life that I had because all of that makes me who I am now, right? So I don't want it to be like I regret my life and I had a terrible life because I did and I had a great life. I don't want it. I don't want to replace it with something different. But now people have the opportunity to live their life in the gender of their mind, the gender of whatever it is, the essence that makes them themselves. And I do, because I am who I am and I have experienced it. I believe when someone tells me they know they're in the wrong gender. Now, I think for someone who's young, it has to be tested. It needs to be lived out over a period of time. I don't think it should be pushed on them.
But if a 12-year-old, whatever age, okay, 10,
I'm
12,
not, yeah,
15,
I'm not here
whatever age.
argue. I'm not going to argue for that because
Yeah, and it's not an
that's not
argument.
really
Look,
my
I'm not,
thing.
and it's not an argument. I'm enjoying this conversation actually. I
Sure. Yeah,
respect.
I'm not being defensive either. I don't mean
No,
to
I
be.
know. I know. So I'm saying, okay, hypothetically a child, 10, 12, 15, whatever. But do you think there's any degree where it's dangerous to say, oh, gee, let us, potentially as parents or other outside influences, there's tons of them, but to say, okay, yeah, let's actually entertain that this idea they have in their mind is true. And I use this example a lot. I'm going to try to pick my words very carefully. Okay. If a child says that they see four strange men in the corner of the room, okay, in reality, no one's there. Okay, they're seeing things that are not there, or potentially they're just claiming they see these things, but they're really not. Do you think it's a smart idea to say, you know what, let's feed into this imagination to a degree where we're willing to now bend their reality and adhere to that? Like, do you see anything dangerous with this in general versus an 18-year-old makes their own decision?
From that example, um, it's either one, a fantasy that the child knows that is a fantasy, and when you play into it, they'll consider it play, or they actually see four people there, and it's their perception. Doesn't mean that there's four people there. They're not, and it may be that they are, I don't know, have something going on that makes them see four people, with a schizophrenia, something else that makes them see those people there. So in that case, that's something that needs to be explored. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist to be able to say, well, this is how you should treat that. But I don't see the danger of play. And if someone is actually has, you know, a condition that's making them see something that's not there. But you see, in my case, and I think genuinely in the case of young people who are transgender, it's not for imaginary people. It's something that is real within themselves. Except, yeah, you can't see it because it's within them. So how do they prove it? It makes it very difficult to prove. I mean, I'll give it that.
Okay. Um, I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't want to how do I even say this? I'm not trying to corner you here. We've spent quite a bit of time on it. There's going to be things that clearly we don't agree on, and that's completely fine. I only bring up these questions because it's so pertinent to, like I said, you share your near-death experience, and
Sure.
and to be fair, you bring up the whole trans thing for a large portion of it, which is completely fine. I just want to reiterate the only reason I ask these questions is because you talk about them. I think there's definitely parts of this that we're just going to disagree on. So we don't have to beat it to death, no pun intended. I'm not here to forcefully change your mind. With that being said, I
I
respect you
don't.
as a
That
person.
never works very well anyway.
Exactly, and it would never be my intention. I respect people. I respect you as a person, and it's very interesting. So I hope you don't mind. I hope you didn't mind me kind of picking your brain about it a little bit. You have to understand, like, if my job is to ask questions, I got to ask these questions. So
I have put myself out here, and I've read comments that people have said about me on other boards, and I mean, there's a percentage of I know that 51%, if we do a survey, there's been a survey. I don't know the year. I expect it's probably 2021, some fairly recent, that 51% of Americans feel that a person transitioning from one gender to another is morally wrong. And so I know there's a slight majority that feels like there's a moral aspect to it, and that it's morally wrong. I agreed with that for a long period of time, and it took having a pretty extreme experience for me to come to terms with myself and change my mind. I mean, it
so
took being
so there
pulled
is
out and
correlation.
shaken and going, "Hey, you don't have to be in such despair. You don't have to live in despair. You can be free of that. And I love you."
So there is correlation, it sounds like, to where you say, okay, I've come so close to death that now you have this, and this is what we could relate on too. We've both come so close to death that we're sitting there saying, hey, I'm gonna die one day. Like the seriousness of that. That's why I do this. So for you, is it perhaps because that awareness of your own mortality is kind of so innate, like so rooted in you that you're like, you know what? I'm gonna die one day. I don't have time to not be myself, and this is factoring into your decision to do it. Would you say that's accurate?
I just think it should be that way for anyone. Memento mori. It's it remember it's a stoic say from Marcus Aurelius. Remember you will die. That's part of it. But there's also a spiritual aspect to it that says is not amoral for me to be myself and love myself. In fact, it's healing for me to be myself, and it's healing for others to love themselves. It's healing for me to love other people as well. And for me to say, you're worthy of being loved. My experience freed me to be able to share that. That fear that I had before, that I thought was knowledge, has changed. It took the near death experience for that change to occur. And I didn't choose it, it happened. Now I chose what I did afterwards, but it's because I wanted to have a full life. It's because I also wanted to live this mission of being able to share that, not just for someone who's trans, for someone who's just transgender. You know, there's some families that have so you have people that of two races or two religions, different religions that love one another, and their religion tells them you can't marry outside of this faith tradition, or you can't marry outside of this particular race, and that's their family pressure, or that's the pressure from their religion. And love one another. Go ahead, live your life. Don't live your life for someone else. You are responsible for your own happiness. And so, in the case of the different races, love each other. Have as full lives together as you can. People of different religions, have as full lives as you can. Love one another. Sure. And the other part of it is the difficulty that I imagined would be created by this, the dystopian world that I thought that I would live as a result of coming out, that would be so disastrous for my family, for myself. It didn't happen. I was creating all that in my mind. I was thinking of what's the worst possible scenario. And okay, it's not perfect. I got divorced. I was married for 20 couple years with someone I loved and still care for. That was deeply, deeply wrenching and difficult. It's still hard for me. And I do feel guilt over that because I knew that that partner wouldn't be coming with me to this side. But they're okay, and they're free then of someone who is like me, and they're free to pursue their own lives and someone that's a better match for them, and they've been able to do that. Now when I got married, I didn't have a full understanding of this. Was I tooled around with it in my mind, I researched it, I thought about it, and I'm like, I wasn't really sure. And that could be the same thing with kids, and that could be an argument there, and I'll give you that.
My goal was not to argue. We obviously disagreed on that one thing, so I had to bring it up. But
It's not a huge. It's not as much of a disagreement as you may think, but I hate to legislate what decisions a family can make.
if it was my child, I would do it differently than you, and that's a fact. But that doesn't mean there has to even
Yeah.
be any bad blood between us, which I
Oh, and it's
respect the
not.
hell out of.
I would affirm my child.
I wouldn't do that. I'd say you're
Yeah.
too young to be making permanent decisions. You're not getting a tattoo, you're not smoking cigarettes, you're not doing any of that shit.
Oh, to say that I'm permissive, that's not really the point. That it's if you allow someone to express who they feel they are on the inside, that's different than smoking cigarettes. I mean, in my mind, it may not be in yours, but in my mind, they're different categorically.
Definitely way different activities, just in terms of, the long-term effects of something, God forbid. And look, it's gonna happen. Some people will make the wrong decision and say, I'm not going to get into the whole detransitioners and stuff. We'll save that for another time. But just in general, when you're 18, you could do whatever the hell you want, and I can't stop you. Until then, I would personally, I wouldn't do it. I don't even have
How would
children, to
you
be
how would you be
100%
with your
fair. So open me up to the scrutiny. But I do stand by what I've said. So
how would you be with your child after that? If they're 18, they go off to college,
how would I want?
and they come back, and you have a daughter that goes off to school, and she comes back and she's shaved her head and she's wearing a binder, and she's not shaving, She's wearing camo. I mean, I'm going very stereotypical here, but
But what was the question?
how would you feel about it? And then if she expresses, Dad, I'm queer. I'm queer, Dad.
If
Um,
he or she was a full-grown adult, I would obviously I would never love them any less, you know?
okay,
And it's kinda like,
good,
"Hey, you're an adult, you
good.
can do what you do." Now I would perhaps have conversations with them and say, "Hey, look, have you looked at this angle? Have you looked at that angle?" I would attempt to say, "Hey, look, if this is what you wanna do, great, but make sure you're, not having blind spots here." I would encourage them not to make rash decisions on impulse.
I think everything you said to that point is being a good parent, and I would, in my process with my child, that dealing with gender issues, would be exactly the same way.
Fair enough. Uh
It doesn't mean that they wouldn't end up with consulting with their psychologists and with doctors, and that they end up, trying some hormone blockers and perhaps taking, if they're testosterone or estrogen, whatever the case may be, so they can have an opportunity to get some of that experience of what the body would feel like. And as someone who's experienced that, I think, see, that's something that cis don't get, and you're not going to. And that's the experience of starting on a hormone therapy regime. At some period of time, you're going to feel like, finally, not just my body, but my mind is beginning to align with who I believe myself to be.
I'm
And there's some
curious how
people.
much of it I'm curious how much of it is, if you're unhappy with yourself that you're trying to say it, and this is just not with you, but with anyone. I'm curious.
Is it psychosomatic?
Well, is it here, let me literally turn myself into an actual different person on a neurological level. Like because if they don't like themselves so much that they're like, I'm gonna turn myself into literally another person. I'm
I'm
curious how much
I'm
that
still the
factors in.
same. I'm still the same person. I think that I may have some processing differences. I definitely have more access to empathy and emotions. That has changed. But in terms of my core of my sense of self, that hasn't changed. My self-loathing has changed, but that's just because I let that go. That was me holding on to that, because that was my life and my fear, and I gave myself over to it. I mean, that was my prison of my own creation. That wasn't something that someone else had made for me. And I had to let myself out, and I had to let myself out of that. I think other people are in that same place. It doesn't have to be just the subject of gender. It can be other things that I may not even be able to imagine.
Perhaps to tie this whole thing together, because I've kept you for a little bit longer than I said we would, so I don't want to keep you all night. My apologies, okay? You're more than welcome back on. Perhaps since we already had this conversation, we don't have to go down this road again. If you ever want to, you're more than welcome. But to
Sure.
tie this whole thing together, that's really why I do this. It's so incredible the effects, like the profound effects that a near-death experience has like on people's minds. It's so incredible. Like not everyone has that brush with death, and like it affects people in different ways. And that's really what I'm just after, picking people's brains about. So I just want to say, thank you so much for coming on. You're more than welcome back anytime. I really hope we've like maintained a level of respect. I still respect you. I know I've asked you some tough
I
questions.
never, I never disrespected you.
No, absolutely. So this is what I'm saying. I hope, I don't want you to feel cornered. I know we talked about some touchy stuff, so I just want to let you know that I'm so happy you came on. I thoroughly enjoyed having the conversation. People get confused, like, how can another person not understand my point of view? It's like, well, they're living in a completely different body than I am. Like, of course they're going to think something different. So perhaps that's part of the puzzle too.
We have to have conversations. I firmly believe that we've lost the art of conversation. When I engage in a conversation with you today, there's a part of me that I have to set aside. Ego, perhaps, in order to have this conversation that we've had. Be able to talk without getting defensive or upset or attacking one another or calling each other names. Because none of that's necessary. And it may be that even in having these kinds of conversations, that a person on the other side might change their mind. I mean, it may be, and so we should be open to other people's thoughts and ideas and be in conversation with them and allow ourselves to, if someone is right, if we find truth in what someone says that's different from how we personally feel, wrestle with that. Wrestle with it and maybe admit, I think I was wrong. I was wrong. And now I feel like the way this person does. We have to have those kinds of conversations. We can't just go, "Oh, I don't agree with that person, so put them on an island so I don't have to deal with them."
I agree. I think we need to keep the communication alive and just that's how you gain an understanding. For some
Yeah.
reason, I think it's very important to at least attempt to understand other people and hear them out, give them a chance to speak. So, um,
It for me, it's an obligation, really, unless the other person is a danger to me. Then I'm not going to engage in that. But you're having a conversation with someone who's educated, well spoken, is a little thoughtful about what they've gone through, and so I'm able to articulate a lot of this. There's some things that are even beyond my language, or that I haven't even um, thought about, perhaps. And okay, that's like identifying some blind spots, maybe. That's okay. Gives me something to mull on, doesn't it?
I ask every guest the same question at the end. If you could ask one question to the person watching this video right now, what would it be?
Is there anything in your life that you feel you love or that gives you meaning that you haven't pursued because of other people's demands of what you think other people would think, because you think of how your deity would respond? Love yourself enough to at least explore that. And if you're not, do no harm. I'm gonna say don't go. Do no harm. Don't harm yourself. Don't harm others. Act out of love. In fact, love yourself enough to be free of all of those things. What is that? Do you have that in yourself? And if you don't, great. You're where you need to be. But if you haven't, then reflect on it. Think about if you went through kind of experience that I or others who had a near death experience had, would you live differently? Would you not necessarily live differently? Would you do that thing that you love or that you wish you could do, but that you don't do because of how you think others would react or what they think of it? Perhaps you should reconsider that. But think about that. We have to create our own meaning in this life. I'm living a life that gives me meaning. You're living a life that gives you meaning, right? And I'd rather have meaning than just thoughtless happiness, silly, giddy happiness all the time. I'd rather live a thoughtful life that I feel like I'm contributing to others. And thus, why do I do these interviews? That's it. That's it. And I'm going to get ridiculed for it. And some places I won't.
I had this conversation the other day. I said, if you were perfect, which I'm not convinced is possible, I'm saying anyone.
If you're
No, no, no.
perfect, you'd probably be put to death.
They
Yeah,
would crucify you, right? You
right.
know what they would
Exactly.
do? You know what they would do? They would hate you for being perfect. Look
That's
at
right.
him, he's so
Exactly.
perfect.
Yep. No argument there.
You could be doing the Lord's work in the most literal way, and someone out there is going to throw mud in your hair, and that's the same for you, for me. I could be the best person on the planet. At a certain point, you say, okay, let me decipher between the people who there's nothing you could do to make them happy, and then the people that might be giving you constructive criticism, where you could say, okay, maybe I take that a little bit more seriously,
Hmm.
versus the people that are just, you know They have nothing better to do. They want to talk shit, let them talk shit, you know?
Hmm.
Don't let them infiltrate your mind if you have the ability to decipher the intentions. Um,
Which you
I-
can't always do.
which is tricky sometimes. Where can the people find you? I'll put all of your links in the description, but I don't know if you wanted to say your websites and stuff.
Yeah, well, my work is end of life care, helping guide people who are have a terminal diagnosis and or prognosis, usually within the last 6 months of life, as non-medical care. Hospice takes care of that. This is helping you make your arrangements so your family isn't burdened with having to find, a copy of your insurance policy or the title to your car because it's, buried in a book on a shelf with 300 other books. As a starter, but trying to create a space where you feel peace and helping you find peace until you pass. That's what I do is my work now. I loved working when I did finally go. I did work in a hospital, by the way, as a resident child. It was a residency. And I did that 1 year following my near death. And then I started that day one as Kailey. It was quite a journey, very fast journey. I enjoyed that enough, and I was around people who were at the end of their life enough that I knew that I could spend time with someone who was getting ready to pass into the next life. And I think that may be part of the gift that I have. Is dying is a natural part of life. And it's still actually just a part of the total life that your soul is going to experience. And so it doesn't just end at death. And so I try to help you find comfort in that transition. So my website is virginiadeathdoula.com.
Thank you so much for coming on. You have an incredible story. I respect your time. I thank you very much for coming on. You are more than welcome anytime if you would like to. To everyone else watching, thank you so much for your sliver of time. This has been ours. And Kailey, thanks again.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Peace out.